What should you know about responding to student work? Well, I think the big thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about responding to student work is that you want to make sure that they understand that you're reading what they're writing. That, to me, is the big thing. Because if you can establish that connection between them as an author and you as an audience, it makes that rhetorical connection much more concrete in their minds. So they can see that you're responding specifically to the things that they're saying. And these can be really small gestures that you don't really need to spend too much time on performing. So for instance, it might be underlining something you think is interesting. If they say something funny, maybe you put a smiley face in the margin. Star something you want to talk about later in your comments at the end, or that you want to discuss with them in class. All of these things don't take very much time, but they let your students know that you're actually following what they're saying. If you're not following what they're saying, I mean, make a question mark in the margin, something like that. Something that you can use then to establish a further conversation, engage them in discussion. So that's, for me, is the big thing. And I think if you can create that small little gesture that shows, hey, I'm listening, it's going to go a long way in forming a connection with your students, giving them an idea that if they're listening, then I should be giving my best every time. And I have a funny little story. I actually had a friend in grad school who wrote an essay for a professor, and maybe it was like one of those grad school papers, so like 20 pages or so. And maybe on page 13 she put a sentence in that said, "If you're still reading this, Dr. X, please put a smiley face in the margin." And she got her essay back, and of course there was no smiley face in the margin. So I think that's one of the things that you can do. If you can show you're listening, that you're following along, that's really going to help your students feel like that there's something invested in this relationship. So that's number one. The other thing that I would say that you should know about responding is that you don't need to comment on every little thing. In fact, less is more in this situation. If you were to comment on every mistake that you see, every error, every question you had, everything you wanted to bring up with the student, you're going to overwhelm them. They're not going to be able to know where to start for revision. So you can think about the things that you see in terms of higher order concerns and lower order concerns. Focus on the things that are the most important. Maybe bring up two or three, three at the very most. Two, I think, would be the best. Things that they can work on for revision. So, begin with ideas, engage those ideas, ask questions about what they're saying, challenge them. That's what I try to do. Whenever they say something, even if I'm playing devil's advocate, if I agree with them, I'll try and bring in a different perspective, suggest that they think about it in a new way. And then from there, when you move through the drafts, those you can go to the lower order concerns, the things that are not as important, I guess I'll say. Well, they're still important, but they're important on a lower level. So these would be things like organization, grammar, So when you get closer to the end of the semester, or closer to the end of a writing process, then you might bring up a contextualized grammar lesson. I noticed that you always do X. Can you work on that for next time?